Previously on the Shamble Chample, Cuphead and his pal Mugman, and the other one, embarked on a magical journey to DLC Island. However, due to our friends being a little too adventurous in their endeavors, they all returned completely handicapped. What will await our porcelain pals? Will they still be able to keep up in this modern era?
Yeah, so in other words, I'm gonna try and beat Cuphead without jumping. If you're watching this video without having seen the one I made on this game's expansion, then you can go ahead and watch it right here or in the link in the description. If you don't want to go do that, then that's kind of rude, but also let me catch you up on the rules of this challenge. No using the jump button. That's it, that's the only rule. Anything else is on the table. I suppose it's also worth noting that I'm going to be doing all the fights and levels off of an already completed file, so that I have all the items and abilities already unlocked, including the stuff from the DLC. This not only makes the challenge actually possible, but it also makes it way more interesting, trust me. So with all that fluff nice and packed away, let's finish off the rest of Cuphead without ever jumping. Like in the DLC video, I'm going to be running through these fights in order from easiest to hardest with respect to the challenge. So, that being said, we start off with every plane level. Believe it or not, operating a flying vehicle removes the need to jump in any capacity. So the only thing that we're not allowed to do in these fights is parry. And trust me, you don't have to ask me twice. Now that we're officially on to the actual fights, we can start off in the no brain required tier with my man Bouts. This guy really doesn't do much. All of his attacks can be avoided by either just moving out of the way or by ducking. And yeah, that's kinda it. Nothing else is really going on with this guy. And standing strong alongside him in this bottom tier are the Vegetable Boys, who are similarly not up to much these days. The hardest of these guys is the potato, but you can just walk behind him and he won't be able to shoot you. From there, both the onion and the carrot are very tame in their attacks, making jumping far from a necessity. However, things won't be so simple forever. Although my equipment was pretty bare bones in the first couple fights, from now on I'll be using the Cookie Charm, which allows us to use Miss Chalice in place of Cuphead, as she is strictly better in a couple ways. She has more health, can parry by dashing instead of jumping, and can do an invincible crouch dash, which will be extraordinarily useful as we move into the mild concern tier, aka like all the guys from the third island and no one else. Starting us off here is the pirate ship fight, which doesn't pose much of a threat at all. The only thing we ever really have to watch out for and dodge is the ship's cannon shot, which he doesn't even start doing until like halfway through the fight. And things only get easier when moving into the final phase, as there's a neat little sweet spot right here where you're safe from pretty much all of the boss's attacks. And although the next two fights, being the Lady and the Rat, are slightly more hectic than the ship fight, they don't offer up too much in terms of new strategy. Almost every single one of these boss's attacks can be completely avoided using the invincible dash. Almost. So, with a bit of perseverance throughout all three of these fights, they can be defeated without too much trouble. Things are starting to get a little bit spicier as we move into the mild concern but to the left tier. Here we finally get our first taste of the worst thing known to all no jumping challenges: platforms. Starting with the Candy Queen, we just have a little bit more to worry about compared to the previous fights. Her first two phases involve tossing out a random assortment of really simple food dudes, but her final phase is a little bit scarier. Luckily, we can avoid the most concerning obstacle, being this massive rolling mint, by using Miss Chalice's parry dash, which gives just a tiny bit of height every time we parry something, allowing us to properly navigate the fight until it finally ends. The other guy chilling in this tier is the Flower Dude, who similarly has a pretty problematic final phase, as he essentially just makes us play the floor is lava. However, unlike last fight, we gotta solve this problem before the final phase actually starts, which again means we're gonna have to use our parry dash on an attack in order to access these platforms. From there, we had to hang onto these for the remainder of the fight, which is made much harder by the constantly changing platform heights, sometimes making dashing between them impossible. But with a bit of luck, it's certainly doable. So far in this challenge, the only real opposition we've come across has been in the form of slightly difficult execution. However, although some fights might not be easy to do, the answer was at least usually pretty obvious. However, this was all about to change as we enter the what the heck tier, starting with the frog dudes. These first couple phases are absolutely no problem, but things start to get weird once they commence their combining ritual and become a slot machine. At which point we're expected to pull the lever by parrying it all the way up there with no way to get off the ground. This is a disaster. The only way that I found that I could get immediate height in my last video was Cuphead's invincibility super. However, that guy can't parry without the jump button, and insultingly, Miss Chalice, who does have the ability to parry in this challenge, has completely different supers, none of which grant enough height to parry the lever with a dash. I couldn't just piggyback off the strats that I used for the DLC, I needed something new, something that could change the way that we look at this entire challenge. And that thing is crack shot super jumps. The crackshot is an insanely overpowered weapon, and I only realized it once I really got into the meat of the challenge. Not only does it have some of the best DPS in the game up close, and not only does it have aimbot when you're focused on other things, but its super shot actually counts as a pink projectile that can be parried by none other than Miss Chalice. This effectively creates a brand new movement option for us. At the cost of a single card, we can basically jump at will. And although it doesn't make any fights from here on out trivial, it gives us the extra push we need to finish off the frogs and continue with a bit more confidence. And our path to victory marches on with the train boss. Much like the frogs, this fight consists of a few relatively straightforward phases before requiring us to hit an insanely high parry. However, with a bit of initial height from parrying our cart, followed by a mid-air super jump, we could hit that thing with ease. You know, I probably could have also damage boosted from the ground since that also bounces you up, but this strat's way cooler. Hilariously, this new technique also allows us to more feasibly plow through the two final bosses, starting with the devil himself. This first phase has a ton of really annoying attacks, specifically this arm attack that can only barely be avoided with a super jump and some aerial stalling. However, that doesn't even compare to the final phases, which have us traversing a constantly dwindling number of platforms to avoid a ton of projectiles. However, with a bit of maneuvering, this guy goes down without too much of a fight. However, the same couldn't be said about King Dice, who has us parry a die in order to decide what mini-bosses I have to fight before even getting a chance at him. This part was actually pretty terrifying at first, as it looks like you can't reach the die with a parry dash. But if you wait until it dips down all the way, it's just barely reachable. As for the mini-bosses themselves, I found most to be annoying, but not really impossible. Although I opted not to fight all of them, as I would like to maintain my sanity, I'm pretty sure the only actual impossible one is the monkey, as it requires you to parry while flying on a plane, something I'm pretty sure not even Miss Chalice can do without the jump button. With that, all that's left is the king himself, who, despite how he looks, actually isn't too bad. If you have really good timing, you can actually parry off the heart cards by dashing, although it certainly doesn't look like you should be able to. And with both of those guys defeated, we finally get to face the true final boss of this tier, the goddamn clown. The boss himself isn't bad at all, but this roller coaster that's constantly barging through can be an absolute pain to avoid. The front and back of the ride, alongside the passengers themselves, can all technically be avoided with the invincible dash, but I opted to primarily use super jumps and occasional damage boosts to avoid having to deal with them altogether, as the timing is really strict. This guy was truly a pure test of skill in maneuvering without jumping. Seriously, if you want a good challenge in this game, this fight's probably your best bet. However, with all that being said and done, we have still 2 fights remaining. 2 fights that belong in a tier all by themselves. The true final bosses of this challenge. And they reside in the confines of the godforsaken Jimmy tier. Both the dragon and the bee are platform-based fights that I could only conceivably do with the help of my man Jimmy. If you spin around in circles on the main map, which is really hard to do on keyboard, then this guy will show up to double your health for the next fight. This means that we'll be entering these fights with 8 HP, and although that may sound like it'd carry us no matter what we do, trust me when I say that these are a requirement, not a luxury. Okay, let me take that back. You might not technically need it for the dragon, but I couldn't ever really even get close to beating this guy with only 4 health, so forgive me there. However, since I got so much practice on only 4 health, I was able to refine my strategy for the beginning here quite a lot. The dragon's first attack is always the lasers, meaning I can parry them to get a good amount of free extra height at the very start. It's also important to note that parrying attacks also gives you extra cards, which for us means more super jumps, and therefore more chances we have to stay alive. Card economy is excessively important as we move into this second phase, as none of these attacks can be parried, meaning we have to be super frugal about how many super jumps we do. And although we can stay up for a while, avoiding at least a little damage here seems pretty much impossible. But this sentiment only continues as we enter the third phase, which not only keeps the trend of having nothing to parry, but it also has much harder attacks to dodge. You can start to see here why I needed Jimmy's help for this one. It just really doesn't seem feasible to dodge everything while also maintaining our height. However, with that extra bit of help we got, it is in fact possible, leaving only one fight to go. So, in my video covering the DLC, I teased at potentially tackling the full game, but I prefaced it by saying that, although I'll tell you now, there's no way the B fight is doable in any universe. I just now thought of that. And to be honest, I was perfectly willing to stand by this statement. I barely made it out of the dragon fight, and that was with double our health and a ton of practice. The B fight, on the other hand, has a very similar platform-based approach, except instead of going left, they all move down. This makes it extremely difficult to survive for even over 20 seconds, let alone long enough to actually complete the fight. It honestly seems far from possible. But did you guys really think that I was about to make this video if I didn't have something incredible to show you? We start off the fight with the triple shot, which has the highest DPS in the game if you hit all of the bullets. However, I still can't do enough damage at the start here to build up any cards, so I'm forced to take damage. However, I use my invincibility frames to get into position for a quick parry off of this bomb. From there, I finish the first phase and then parry his second bomb. Now, to stay up, I start doing a special trick with my super jumps that involves stalling in the air for as long as possible. This allows me to travel up 3 platforms at a time instead of 2, which is way harder than it looks, but absolutely necessary. Now here, the bee has a 33% chance to do this orb attack followed by a triangle attack, which I absolutely need her to do. This is because both of these attacks spawn parryable projectiles, which allows me to be able to survive and progress in the fight without taking any damage myself. However, I also need to be careful not to do too much damage during these attacks, as I actually want her to stay in her second phase so that she does this attack. Although I can't avoid damage here as there's nothing to parry, it's a lot better than her third phase, as the platforms speed up once we get to that point. Now, although it doesn't look like it, she actually is technically in her third phase right now. She just hasn't finished this attack yet. This allows us to deal damage to her final phase without experiencing the consequences of the faster platforms. But we can't just delay the inevitable forever. And with a few more survival maneuvers, I get to the point where I can do nothing but just throw myself at the boss and pray. Dang, I had 3 health left too? I guess that's what you get with 5 hours of practice! Anyway, with that fight, alongside all of the others that we've endured up to this point, every single boss in Cuphead's entirety has been defeated without ever having to jump. Oh shoot, I also gotta do the run-and guns. Unlike the bosses, these levels are much more traditional platforming levels, which you might think makes them much harder than the fights. And there, I would actually have to agree with you, as long as harder means longer! The first couple run-and guns were actually kinda concerning on account of the fact that you can't always gain infinite card charge, and therefore don't seem to have enough juice to bypass some of these sections purely through super jumps. However, this problem can be solved by bringing back my man Cuphead, who can equip the coffee charm in order to never run out of cards. However, since we can't parry with this guy, we can't do super jumps, and instead have to rely on the OG jump replacement, invincibility. With this build, we basically straight up can jump. It just has a minute-long cooldown. Very fun, very cool, I'm glad I did this. Luckily, I was able to actually avoid resorting to this technique in the remaining run-and guns, which generally have many more enemies to get card charge off of. But I'm still gonna keep it completely real with you guys, none of these levels are interesting. The only relatively cool one was the fun fair, where I made sure to unequip my my super, get 5 cards at the very beginning, and then rationed out my super jumps while slipping in damage boosts in order to barely have enough to get the height needed to access the final area. Outside of that, my main strat for the rest of these things basically came down to a similar but slightly varied approach of calling in Jimmy, building up cards in the beginning, and then just plowing through the rest without having to think. Yeah, sure, I could have come up with cleaner strats for these or whatever, but you have to understand that I did all of these after I already finished the B fight, so I was just very ready to be done recording. Hey, speaking of being done recording, welcome to the end of the video. If you're still here, let me know by subscribing and doing all the other YouTube classics. If you want to see more from me, let me know of other challenges you want me to do in the comments. Trust me, if I'm down for this video, then I'm down for anything. I got a couple more challenges just like this one in the works, although my next couple videos will be regarding my new Kirby Squeak Squad 100% task, so keep that on your radar. For now though, I'm done, don't talk to me.